Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is John Hendren, Director of Public Relations for PDK International. For those of you that don't know, PDK International runs a career and technical student organization known as Educators Rising, and we are so pleased this afternoon to be able to welcome one of our friends from CTE to update our Ed Rising community about everything that you may want to know about how to scale up your CTE program. We're going to get some updates, a little bit about Perkins funding and more. Before we get to that, I want to share a little bit more about Educators Rising. And to do that with me is going to be my colleague, Lisa Rollins. Lisa, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. We really appreciate it. We just wanted to touch base with ACTE is such a strong organization to support our CTE pathways. And Educators Rising is so happy to know that we have been around since 1937 and we rebranded as Educators Rising in 2015. So we just celebrated our 10 years as Educators Rising. As John mentioned, we are a career and technical student organization that is the only CTSO that supports the education and training pathway. So if you're an ECE or education professions in your district or in your state, we can help to support the leadership components and the career and technical components for your students as well. We've had over 151,000 students become Educators Rising members since 2015. And we have a presence in all 50 states. We do have state affiliation agreements with 39 states. You'll see a map of the United States appear now next on your screen. If it's highlighted in blue, that means you are an official state affiliate of ours. If it's just shaded in gray, it means we have a presence there, either a chapter or curriculum user there. We have over 20,000 student members and over 1,000 chapters. I think we're close to 12 to 1,300 chapters now. Fall registration was November 1st, so we're still getting some registrations in from that. If you haven't registered your students yet or you have a spring semester course, February 1st is the next registration deadline for that. And we will move on now. Here we're going to talk about why our solution is relevant. We know that there are unfilled vacancies across the country. We know that there are underqualified teachers. What I love about Ed Rising is that our students are so much more prepared to enter the workforce than other students who are entering the workforce without Educators Rising. We have so many state and regional coordinators who say, my kids are so much better prepared. My kids are light years ahead of other kids who are in the same year in college as them getting their certification. So putting your students in a CTSO helps with leadership. It helps with making sure that they're prepared for their future career. And it's also an investment in your own district, right? You have students right in your schools who can help to fill the teacher pipeline, to help with those teacher shortages. So we're really proud that our students are part of that movement. In addition, students who are part of Educators Rising are more likely to enter the workforce. And sometimes it just is about career exploration and exposing our students to new careers that they may not have ever thought of. After being in Ed Rising, 50% of our students said that they intend to pursue teaching, and over 80% indicated an interest in education professions. So it might not be that they want to become a teacher, and that's okay. We have a teacher shortage, but we also have a shortage in parapros. We also have a shortage in bus drivers and cafeteria workers and admin positions. There's so many places for students to find a career in education. And as I mentioned in our last webinar, I had a student who told me that they wanted to be a nurse. And I said, well, why don't you want to be a school nurse? They'd never thought about being a school nurse, right? They just thought they had to work in a medical setting. They didn't think about an educational setting. So within our program, you can explore multiple different careers. Next, I want to talk about a little bit of the resources that we offer our students and teachers. So I call these the 5 Cs. And there's chapters, which you can start with one teacher and one student. Our national dues are $15 per student. You may have state dues depending on what your state has organized for you. We talk a little bit about our conference. Our conferences are the most inspiring time of year. Every year in June, we have a national conference where all of the students from all of the state organizations come together and compete against each other. Even if you don't want to compete, I highly encourage you to just come and check it out. Check out the breakout sessions. Our featured guest today did a session at our national conference last year, and it's just really inspiring to see over 3,500 future educators and their teachers who are taking their summer break to bring them to conference come together and celebrate all their hard work throughout the year. And that's where we build that sea of community. We want to make sure that we have a community where teachers can rely on each other. They can build that community and collaboration because we often find that sometimes education teachers are the only teacher in their school and sometimes the only teacher in their district. So it's really important that we collaborate and teachers get to meet teachers and future educators get to meet future educators. And how we help do that is by providing a curriculum for them as well. So if you have a CTE program and you don't have a CTE education and training pathway and you have no curriculum, you have no resources, you're creating lessons on your own and on your own time, please feel free to reach out because we can provide you with some resources and supports to do that as well, including assessments and micro credentials. And we have some really great partnerships with institutes of higher ed where your students can obtain all 5 micro credential badges and earn college credit. So if you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out at community@educatorsrising.org and someone can help you with that in obtaining either the micro credentials, the curriculum, or the assessments. And have no fear, we are standards aligned. We have standards that will meet all of your program standards and can be crosswalked with your own standards as well. And we do have a revision cycle for our curriculum every 3 years, so it's just been updated. Again, if you're interested in starting a chapter, getting resources, anything that I've mentioned here, please feel free to reach out to community@educatorsrising.org. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And now I would love to turn it over to Dr. Alicia Heslop, who is going to be from the Chief Policy Research and Content Officer from ACTE, our National CTE Organization Partnership. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. It's so great to be here with you all today and to be able to share a little bit about what's going on at the national level in the CTE space to help you position your education and training programs and get the resources you need to be successful in your work. As Lisa said, I'm the Chief Policy Research and Content Officer at the National Association for Career and Technical Education. So my work spans the entire spectrum of CTE programs and students across the country. And I'm going to talk about kind of 2 of the buckets today that I focus on a lot at ACTE. The first is going to be federal policy and what's going on in Washington that has the potential to impact your programs. And then I'm going to share a little more about the professional development and content that we have available at ACTE that might be able to help you not only navigate this federal policy environment, but also strengthen your programs on the ground as well. But I'm going to start with the policy situation. And I will preface this by saying if you happen to be watching the recording of this webinar at a later date, some of this information may have changed. I'm recording at 4:30 in the afternoon on November 4th. The way things are going in Washington, even by this evening, there could be updates on what I'm going to share. And as I go through the presentation, I'll share some links of places you can go to get that most up-to-date information on these federal policy activities. But here's where we are as of today. The federal government is currently shut down. We are on day 35 of the government shutdown. It is nearing the record for the longest government shutdown in history, and the effects are growing. All around the country, we're starting to see the ripple effects of no resources coming out of the federal government, things like Head Start in the education space, things like SNAP, food benefits for individuals, certainly pay for federal workers, and the list really goes on as far as impacts. Education programs are largely protected from the most dire impacts of the government shutdown because the vast majority of education funding is provided in advance. So the appropriations bills that Congress passed last year were actually for this current school year. And the FY26 bills that they're working on right now will be for the money that ultimately goes to schools on July 1 of next year. And so we have a little bit of a cushion as far as the big education programs like the Every Student Succeeds Act, Title I and Title II, Title IV, the Perkins Act, of course, which provides the bulk of our CTE money, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. All of that money had largely already gone to schools. Where we are seeing some impacts already of this government shutdown on education are more in the space of administrative support, technical assistance. They're not staff left at the Department of Education that can really help states or school districts if they have questions. A lot of data collection has paused. A lot of technical assistance work has paused. A lot of competitive grants have paused. If your school was planning to, apply for a competitive funding stream, or maybe even had been awarded one, but is waiting on the funds, there's been a lot of disruption in those spaces. But at this point, we're starting to see some hopeful signs that the shutdown could be ending soon. That's one of the things I'd encourage you, if you're watching later, to check back, and we'll have the latest information on that. We're starting to see some conversations happening amongst policymakers on both sides of the aisle, some bipartisan conversations going on, which were not happening a few weeks ago. So that's a very positive sign. Lots of comments that they hope the shutdown could potentially end this week or early next week. However, even if they're able to reopen the government, they still have to finish work on FY26 funding. The proposal that was on the table when the government shut down at the beginning of October was a short-term continuing resolution to keep funds flowing through November 21st. Well, at this point, that's only a couple of weeks away. So that date is not a realistic time frame for Congress to finish work on all 12 of the appropriations bills that need to be finalized. And so at whatever point they reopen the government, they'll have to have a later date for that continuing resolution. And then they will have to get to work on finalizing those appropriations bills. They exist in various forms in the House or Senate. The bill that's most relevant to us is the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Appropriations Bill. That bill has passed through committee in the House and Senate, but looks very different. Over on the Senate side, it's relatively level funding across the board for education programs. Few small increases, few small decreases, but primarily level funding, including for all the big K-12 programs, for Perkins, level funding. Over on the House side, they did provide an increase, a small one, to the Perkins Act, which is great, but there were very steep cuts to other education, training, workforce development programs that could have very detrimental impacts on the education system as a whole in many communities, which in the long run doesn't serve to benefit CTE programs or services for students. So Congress is going to have to reconcile those bills and come up with some type of agreement on FY26 funding. We're hearing a number of different dates and deadlines that they might try to operate with. One is in December, right before the holidays. That's a common strategy that's used. Another is that they might punt that work into January or even February of next year. We'll be okay in the education space as long as they don't push it any later than that because school districts will start their budgeting work for the following year in the spring. So it's really helpful to know what those numbers look like, before those budget decisions and conversations have to start. So that whole conversation around FY26 funding, of course, the government shutdown, have really been taking up most of the attention in Washington, particularly in the last few weeks. And there's not a lot else going on in Congress. But I do want to flag just a few quick things that are more in the administration's kind of vein right now. And the first is the implementation of the budget reconciliation bill. This was a huge bill. It covered all kinds of tax and changes to Medicare and things like that this summer. It had very small pieces of education policy in it. One was a new provision for short-term Pell Grants. That's something that many in the CTE community were very interested in. There were some changes to student loans, which could be of interest to a lot of students in your pathways who are going on into post-secondary education and looking for financing for their programs. And there were some changes around some new school voucher related provisions. All of those provisions are now in the hands of the Department of Education to develop regulatory guidance for implementation. So we're starting to see they have some regulatory committees meeting. It's called negotiated rulemaking. They've got some, we'll start to see drafts of things circulating. And so that's something to be paying attention to over the next few months. We'll certainly be flagging opportunities for input or areas that might impact CTE students or teachers as that kind of goes through the process. The next piece of information from the administration is a set of guidance that came out this summer. It was a reinterpretation of some rules related to the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act, which kind of controls and governs the TANF program, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, and other individual benefits for low-income individuals. And in this guidance, it kind of reinterpreted Perkins as well as adult education funding as falling under some of the restrictions in that law, and basically said that Perkins funding and adult basic education funding could not be used to benefit undocumented students at the post-secondary level. And now, many of you or most of you work in secondary schools at the secondary level, but one area that was flagged was dual enrollment. And I know a lot of education and training pathways utilize dual enrollment. There are also some questions about like industry certifications. Does that fall into this bucket? And how would those be impacted? I know that's also something that could impact your programs. We've submitted a lot of questions to the Department of Education, but because of court activity and legal filings, everything has been paused related to this guidance. So it hasn't been implemented yet, but we also haven't been able to get any answers to those questions. But it's just something to be aware of. Some states have started requiring school districts or colleges to kind of sign off that they are not using their Perkins dollars for anything that would be referenced as part of this guidance. And so that might be something your school district is starting to think about or look at. How do you make sure that none of the benefits flow to undocumented students? It's a lot more complicated in Perkins than in a lot of the programs that used to fall under this guidance. For example, a Pell Grant goes to an individual student. And so if you verify that student's immigration status or citizenship status, and then you give the Pell Grant to that student. However, in Perkins, you don't give money to students directly. It goes for professional development. It goes for CTSOs. It goes for equipment and technology that might exist in a classroom for 5 or 10 years. And so figuring out how to make those determinations were more of our questions that we submitted to the Department of Education. And then the last thing I want to talk about on the policy front is the interagency agreement that has been signed between the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. It was originally surfaced back in May, and then there was court action on it that it got tied up in as well, and it finally started being implemented in September, where the Department of Education has transferred some of the administration of the Perkins Act from Ed over to the Department of Labor. The funding itself has been moved electronically, but they've moved it into the Department of Labor's grant management system. Some of the staff have moved over to the Department of Labor as well before they were furloughed as part of the shutdown. In the short term, the impacts on CTE programs at the local level are minimal. The biggest thing we've been worried about are administrative issues and delays with states accessing their Perkins dollars and then being able to, to get it out to locals. There have been a few hiccups, but it seems like those are being resolved. So short term, that's what we're really focused on, making sure it's not a burden on states and locals to access their Perkins dollars and that they can still get that funding. In the long term, we are concerned about the implications of CTE and CTE programs kind of being administered by the Department of Labor. Historically, Department of Labor programs have been very much work first focused. They are trying to get individuals into a job as quickly as possible. And that makes a lot of sense in the programs that have historically existed at the Department of Labor. If you've got, a dislocated worker that, a single mom that was laid off from a manufacturing job and needs to get back to work as quickly as possible in order to support her family, it makes sense, to try to expedite that placement into the workforce. If you've got a seventh grader who's just beginning to explore careers and pathways, that doesn't make quite as much sense. And so in CTE programs, particularly CTE programs like education and training, and there are many others where many of our students' goals are to go on to a post-secondary education and to even get a bachelor's degree before they enter the workforce. We are concerned about kind of the messaging and the support for that part of the CTE conversation. So right now, it's something that we're monitoring. We're having conversations about. We definitely encourage educators on the ground to speak up anytime you have opportunities to talk about the academic focus of CTE, anytime you have opportunities to talk about the pathways that you've created, things like dual enrollment, things like academic integration, all of those things that have become such a big part of the CTE space over the last couple of decades and that have allowed programs like education and training, programs of study, and organizations like Ed Rising to really expand and grow within CTE. We want to make sure those things don't get lost in this transition, whatever happens at the federal level. So that's a little bit about what's going on in Washington. On the next slide, I have a list of resources, and many of them have already been placed in the chat as well. These are places you can go for the most up-to-date information on all of the things that I just talked about, but also new things that might come up. Things are changing really fast in DC these days. You never know what might be the next new issue or item on the horizon. There's also a link here to our Legislative Action Center. This is where you can write directly to your members of Congress, and you can send a pre-populated letter that we have in the Action Center, or you can write your own letter if you have an issue or topic you want to reach out to members of Congress about. And then the last link is a set of advocacy resources. It includes information about how to reach out to your members of Congress, how to schedule a visit, write a letter, host a site visit, lots of different ways to engage policymakers in the advocacy process. So with that, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. And this slide is a good transition because I want to talk about a few of the resources that we have available here at ACTE that might be able to help you in your role as an education and training educator or leader in this space. And the first one is all about the Perkins Act itself. I mentioned Perkins funding as I was talking about what Congress is working on, but if you're newer to CTE, you might not have ever worked with the details of that piece of legislation. The Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act is that primary federal funding stream for CTE programs. So we have a wide variety of resources on our website. We have a book that's an in-depth look at Perkins if you're, tasked with really overseeing or working on the grant. We also have a number of fact sheets as part of our Perkins 101 series. We have summaries, we have distribution charts that shows you how the money flows, how the money can be spent, all different types of resources on our website that you can use to increase your knowledge on the Perkins Act itself, which can help you figure out how you might be able to access or use those resources in your programs. The next couple of resources that I'm going to talk about are more about how you can build your knowledge of CTE and connect with other educators. So we have a set of community groups, kind of two categories. One are networking groups built around personal characteristics and interests. We have groups around Black CTE professionals, LGBTQ plus, and women in CTE leadership for individuals and their allies that are interested in exploring these topics and issues of educators as well as students. And then we have some topical communities of practice for educators working in different settings or roles. So one for CTE administrators. Then we have urban and rural groups that are tackling issues specific to those communities. We have one that's focused all around work-based learning in different settings and contexts. And then we're revamping a group that's around CTE teacher support, really designed for teacher educators, people that run induction programs, instructional coaches, anybody who's working with CTE teachers, helping them be successful in the classroom. So if you're interested in any of these community groups, you do have to be an ACT member to join, but you can find more information on our website. We also have a full set of professional development resources on our CTE Learn online platform. This is where you'll find those community groups as well, but there's over 200 self-paced online courses. Some of them are free. Some of them require, a fee or subscription, but it's a great opportunity to really build your skills and learn more about CTE programs and opportunities. And there's lessons targeted, across the full spectrum of CTE topics and areas. We also have some resources specifically around our high quality CTE framework. This is a framework, and particularly if you're new to CTE or you're changing schools or programs, this framework can be very beneficial in helping identify what's working well in your program and what might need improvement. It contains 12 elements of a high quality CTE program and 92 individual criteria that emphasize the items and areas that should be focused on within a CTE program of study. Perhaps the most useful tool that we hear is there is an online self-evaluation for CTE programs. So as an educator, you can sit down, you can work through the self-evaluation, and it will identify the elements of your CTE program that might not be as strong as other elements in your program where you might want to focus resources. We've we've heard people that use this as part of their comprehensive local needs assessment that's required at the local level. We've heard people that use this as justification for new resources. Maybe your school requires you to provide some justification for why you want to access a certain type of professional development, or buy a new piece of equipment, or something like that. This online self-evaluation can help in that process, because at the end you get a report out. It provides detailed results on how you did on that self-assessment. And then it links you to our high quality CTE library, which has resources on all 12 elements, everything from student assessment to standards, to work-based learning, to business partnerships, all of the things that need to be in place for high quality CTE programs. You can find toolkits and webinars and articles and links back to courses in our CTE Learn portal, all of those resources here in the high quality CTE library that can help you be successful in that space. And then I also wanted to highlight specifically our teacher pipeline resources. And while some of these are targeted toward administrators that are hiring CTE teachers, I think many of you who are working in this education and training space and working to recruit students into the education pipeline might also find things in these resources that would be useful. We've got a couple of recent reports, one on staffing and one on diversifying the educator workforce and how you can kind of reach new communities in recruiting students into programs. And then probably what's more useful for all of you is our Teach CTE resource repository. It has a particular section, two, I think, that would be particularly relevant. One on recruitment of people into the education profession, and then the other section is on preparation of individuals to move into education pathways. So it's got program examples and resources that talk about best practices in those spaces. And so you might be able to pull out examples or see other programs that are doing things similar to what you're doing. And then the last resource that I want to talk about is a new microsite that we just launched about a month ago, and it's aimed at staff, stakeholders, partners new to CTE. Right now, there is a kind of a first wave of resources there targeted toward school counselors. So if any of you are, working with your school counselor, and maybe it's somebody that doesn't really understand what CTE programs are, or why you need to offer work-based learning for your students, or what a CTSO is, or, some of those questions. We know a lot of school counselors, maybe they come from an elementary school moving into a high school setting, or they come from another setting where they haven't worked with CTE programs before, through no fault of their own, but just their background. And so lots of resources there that you can share with your school counselors. The next wave is going to be for new CTE administrators. And then we're going to continue to add resources for targeted toward other audiences, but many of them are similar. It's things like glossaries, it's things like, briefs on what is work-based learning, what are CTSOs, some of those pieces. So all of you may find things that would be useful there as well. And then I want to mention a couple of fellowship programs we have. If you're interested in diving deeper into ACTE and want to learn more about our leadership activities and build more skills, we have 3 opportunities every year open. We have our National Fellowship Program, which is really about building leadership skills within the CTE community. We have our Next Level Post-Secondary Fellowship, which is for individuals who are wanting to strengthen their skills to work in post-secondary settings. And then we have our CTE for All mentorship program, and applications are open for this right now. It's all about how we kind of broaden the reach of CTE programs and how we can ensure that all students are successful in our programs and build skills in that area. So I encourage any of you that might be interested to look at that mentorship program. And then, lastly, I just want to highlight our upcoming conference, our Career Tech Vision Conference. This year, it's going to be in Nashville, December 9th through the 12th. There's over 300 program sessions across all CTE pathways, lots of different events and networking opportunities. And this is an annual event. If you're not able to make it to Nashville this year, next December, we'll be celebrating ACTE's centennial in New Orleans, Louisiana in December. And so we invite you to submit content and also to plan to attend those sessions. So with that, I will wrap up my comments, but we'll put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions after this webinar, if you're working, watching it later, but otherwise I will turn it back over to John.
Thank you. That was extremely informative. Many of our teacher leaders that have educators rising chapters who are teaching a CTE course, they may not be the traditional CTE teacher. They may have started, I don't know, foreign languages or maybe teaching a tech type course, and then they get into leading all these students who want to think about becoming teachers. Um, for those that have had a program now for maybe a few years,
Mhm.
have some success stories, what are the types of breakout sessions that you all are looking for?
Sure. So we're looking for a wide range of sessions. We provide content first in different content areas of CTE, and so the education and training kind of pathway falls in our lexicon under our family and consumer sciences division. That's that's where education and training, as well as some other kind of clusters and pathways, live. And so we like to have content on how you've built a successful education and training program, either for early childhood education or for teaching professions more broadly. We try to make sure we have content in both of those spaces. Um, and one thing we found over the years as is that the more specific you can make your presentation, the better it is for individuals. So maybe you've got a really amazing work-based learning program for your students where they're working in schools. Maybe you've got a really amazing Educators Rising chapter and you want to talk about what you've been doing there, or maybe you've got some instructional techniques that really work well in your program. So we encourage people to not talk about everything they're doing, but to drill down. So one set of sessions is that kind of content focused. And then we have another set of sessions that's more broadly instructional strategy focused. So we'll have sessions on classroom management and assessment and using data and building partnerships with business and industry that could apply across any content area. Maybe you've got some great performance-based assessment strategies you use, or classroom engagement techniques. And so those types of sessions we love to have as well, in order to help all CTE teachers figure out the best way to reach students in their classrooms.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was profound from one of our own student leaders, he got to participate in a state event recognizing CTE in his state. And he spoke to the power of joining a CTSO. And he said, all his friends belong to a CTSO in his district. And he thought it was so powerful that you get this sort of real world experience before you even graduate. And I think that's such a powerful thing about CT in general. And I think it often when teachers who are not in CT learn about that aspect of it, it becomes so much more powerful, and they're looking for those opportunities. Networking is so important for our teachers, our teacher leaders, and especially for those who may not be used to like how you do the CTSO piece, from fundraising to getting community support. I can only imagine that joining your organization would give them access to that networking and best practices that other teachers have discovered in running their own CTSOs, even if it's not in the education space.
That's the goal, right? To create these environments. We know that a lot of teachers are the only one in our in our disciplines are the only one at their school that's teaching what they're teaching. There might be, and in small schools, there might only be a couple of CTE teachers at all in that space. And so trying to create those connection points, to create tools and resources that allow people to, and environments that allow people to engage in that networking. Our Vision Conference is a great place to do that, but so are our online communities, and um, our state associations have resources too. If
Yeah.
you're newer to this space, and coming to a national conference isn't something you feel like you can tackle quite yet, all of our states have conferences usually over the summer as well, where you can get a taste of those connections and networking that you can engage in.
The other
Cool.
thing I wanted to jump in and say was that if you're a new CTE teacher, because as we talked about, maybe you're teaching English and you're starting a pathway, so you have one section, please reach out to ACTE, even if it's for things like recruitment. When I was a new CTE teacher, I had no idea coming from English to ECE that I had to recruit my own students for my program or my program would get cut due to low enrollment. I was like, well, math teachers don't, social studies teachers don't, and English teachers don't. But that was me. I had to be at a back to school table. I had to go down to the middle schools for scheduling and get them excited. And, parent teacher conferences talking about, I didn't know that I had to find my own kids to keep my program alive. And so ACTE has tons of recruitment ideas and tons of things that you can do to help foster that, and as well not feel like you're alone because you may be the only one. So I did just want to point that out, that if it's only solely for the resources that ACT provides, become a member. And if you can't come to the conference, but I will say I've gone to the conference, well, I couldn't even count how many years in a row now, and there is something for everybody. I mean, literally something for everybody.
Yep. We try to make sure that we have something for everyone, and definitely that marketing and recruitment, that's a great example of that kind of cross-cutting content. It shows up on almost every survey we do of CT professionals as a huge need. So we try to provide resources and ideas in that space.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh,
Yes,
my pleasure.
I will say the same thing. I learned a lot. If you want to get in touch with us from PDK International, we've got a QR code there. You can scan that, request more information. Um, community at educatorsrising.org gives you a direct line to Lisa and her team. I want to thank you for being here with our webinar. Thank you to our guest, Dr. Alicia Hislop, and I hope you have a great evening.